In the last decade, we have seen some huge scandals, such as the Panama Papers, uncovering how tax havens have been used to launder money, conceal wealth, and dodge taxes. Money that could have financed development. Our next speaker may be the world's leading economist on this topic. Gabriel Zucman is a professor of economics and director of the EU Tax Observatory at the Paris School of Economics. Their research is breaking new ground, as well as giving input to decision makers such as the G20. Gabriel Zucman, please welcome.
Thank you for your presence, and thank you so much for having me. So today I'm here to talk about the T word, the terrible T word, taxes. And why taxes? Well, because tax revenue are really key to fund the public goods and the public services that are the engines of economic growth. Or to put it more simply, taxes are essential for development. And that's perhaps one of the main lessons from world economic history. How have rich countries become rich? They've become rich through mass investment in high-quality education for all, through mass investment in high-quality healthcare for all, through mass investment in high-quality public infrastructure. And for all of these investments, you need tax revenues. Now, to be sustainable, a tax system, as you know, has to be fair. And what this means in practice is we have to ensure that those individuals who have a higher ability to pay taxes than others do in fact pay more taxes than the rest of the population. So we need a progressive tax system. A progressive tax system, in fact, is a key pillar of democratic societies. It is essential for social trust in governments and for social cohesion. It is essential to keep wealth concentration in check, and it is also essential to distribute fairly the gains from globalization. Now, the problem that we have today is that there's a growing body of evidence that shows that the super rich pay much less tax, all taxes included, relative to their income than the rest of the population. So this is what the graph here shows, and I just want to take 1 minute or two to make sure that everybody understands what's shown here. So on the x-axis, you have the different income groups of the population. So P010 is the 10% of individuals with the lowest income. P1020 is the next 10%, the next decile. And as you move to the right of the axis, you get to wealthier and wealthier people with a zoom, on the super rich on the right, all the way up to dollar billionaires. Okay, so you rank people by their economic resources. And then on the y-axis, you have the effective tax rate of these different income groups when you include everything, all the taxes that exist, sales taxes, income taxes, corporate taxes that are assigned to the owners of corporations, wealth taxes when they exist, everything. Okay, so studies like that using high-quality data and comparable methods have been conducted in a number of countries. Here I show 4 countries, but there's ongoing work in many more countries. And in all cases, what appears clearly is that the super rich have the lowest effective tax rates of the population. In countries like France or the Netherlands or Italy, billionaires in effect pay half as much in tax relative to their income than their secretaries. That's the situation today, and this is also true in Norway. There's work that we're conducting with my colleagues, Marius Ring and David Syme, that shows very similar results for Norway. So where is that coming from? This comes from the fact that the super rich can relatively easily avoid the income tax, which in principle is the pillar of tax progressivity. And I'm not going to go into the details, but the way it works is quite simple at a high level. When you're very rich, you can relatively easily structure your wealth such that this wealth is not going to generate a lot of taxable income, sometimes even zero taxable income. So for instance, a few years ago, you had revelations by the US media ProPublica on the taxes paid by US billionaires, and you saw in some years, people like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos paying almost zero tax. In 1 year, Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world at the time, reports zero taxable income, and he says, "Oh look, I'm so poor that I'm going to claim family benefits." And he receives, family benefits because he has zero taxable income. So that's the graph, here. That's what the graph here shows. It's just the same as the first chart, but just looking at the individual income tax. The individual income tax for most of the population is progressive, but then the effective tax rate collapses to nearly 0% at the very top of the distribution. Why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem because this failure of our tax systems has been a key driver, a key engine behind the rise in global wealth concentration. So if you look at the wealth owned by global billionaires today, that's about 3,000 individuals, they own in wealth the equivalent of 14% of world GDP. That's 0.0001% of the world population that owns about 14% of world GDP. And that fraction of the world population, that tiny group, owned the equivalent of only 2 to 3% of world GDP in the 1980s. And why is that a problem? Wealth for most people is a good thing, but for the very rich, wealth is power. And an excessive concentration of wealth means an excessive concentration of power. The power to influence public policies, the power to influence the prevailing ideologies, the power to buy newspapers, the power to buy social media, the power to influence, to rig markets, and so on, and so on. And so wealth concentration at some level clashes with our democratic ideals. What do we do about that? There are many things that should be done. And thanks to the leadership of Brazil at the G20 last year, we started to take one preliminary but important step towards addressing that issue. One potential solution to that problem is by having a coordinated minimum tax on the super rich. So the proposal that was put on the table by Brazil, and I wrote the technical report that details that proposal, is the idea of getting together as countries and saying, look, there should be a floor to how low the tax rates of the super rich can go. They should pay in tax each year the equivalent of at least, let's say, 2% of their wealth. It's not super ambitious, 2%, when their wealth is growing 6, 7, 8% per year on average, but it's more than 0%. And even with a small 2% tax rate on a small population of about 3,000 taxpayers, this would generate about 200 to 250 billion in additional tax revenues globally. And so you might say, okay, is that a lot of money, 250 billion? Well, look, I think the best comparison is this. According to the best estimates that we have, developing countries need an additional $500 billion in tax revenue each year to face the challenges of climate change. Now, we can get half of that with just this modest 2% minimum tax on the world billionaires. 2% is modest, but why 2%? The idea is to say, well, we should make sure that our tax systems are not regressive. Of course, there's a debate, an important debate to have about the proper degree of tax progressivity. It's a complicated thing. I know it's easy to overshoot or to undershoot. But I think everybody at some level agrees that it shouldn't be possible for the wealthiest individuals to pay less than other social groups. And so with a 2% minimum tax, essentially that's what you get. It erases that anomaly. And if you extend the tax to people, let's say, with more than $100 million in net wealth, that's the chart that you have here. It's not making our tax systems progressive, but it's getting rid of that unjustifiable regressivity at the very end. Let me just conclude by saying that a coordinated minimum tax is a powerful and, in fact, the most effective option to safeguard the progressivity of our tax systems today. And what is most important to understand is that such a tax has become possible today. It has become possible in part because of past successes in international economic coordination. So for instance, now there is an automatic exchange of bank information between countries that makes it much easier for tax authorities to track assets that are held abroad. That's essential to be able to enforce such a tax effectively. And second, in 2021, more than 130 countries have agreed to implement a minimum tax of 15% on multinational companies. It's insufficient in many ways. The tax rate is very low, but it demonstrates something very important, which is that tax competition is not a law of nature. It's a policy choice. We can choose competition just like we can choose coordination. And what we did for multinational companies, we could do tomorrow for billionaires. Thank you very much.